Hey, what's happening? My name is D, and welcome back to another episode of Book Reviews with the Regular Dude. Today, we're going to be talking about The Fine Print by Lauren Asher, Booktok favorite billionaire romance, and the first in the Dreamland Billionaire series. But before we get into that, I got to give a special shout out to my Plus Ultra Don't Fretter, my top tier supporter on Patreon, Laughing Cat Dog. Thank you so much for your support. You are helping me create this content and ensuring that I'm able to keep putting it out as frequently as I do. And if you also want to help support the channel, make sure you consider subscribing to my Patreon or just like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. The Dreamland Billionaire series is 3 interconnected standalones, so it's not like a regular trilogy. I think each book follows a different billionaire brother. And I actually think that the concept of like interconnected standalones is pretty cool. It kind of reminds me of the Wayfarer series by Becky Chambers, but obviously this isn't sci-fi or whatever. This is romance, lit fic. Yeah, it's contemporary romance, fiction, blah, 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 blah. And while I'm looking it up, I'm going to read the premise. Rowan. I'm in the business of creating fairy tales, theme parks, production companies, 5-star hotels. Everything could be all mine if I renovated Dreamland. My initial idea of hiring Zara was good in theory, but then I kissed her. Things spiraled out of control once I texted her using an alias. By the time I realized where I went wrong, it was too late. People like me don't get happy endings, not when they're destined to ruin them. Zara. After submitting a drunk proposal criticizing Dreamland's most expensive ride, I should have been fired. Instead, Rowan Kane offered me a dream job. The catch, I had to work for the most difficult boss I'd ever met. Rowan was rude and completely off limits, but my heart didn't care, at least not until I discovered his secret. It was time to teach the billionaire that money can't fix everything, especially not us. I'm not gonna lie, that's a bad premise because you don't really they don't tell you, it's confusing. And I guess I'll get into it a little bit more once I get into the rant review section of this video. But yeah, it's about, okay, so the 3 brothers, Rowan, who gives a shit, and I don't remember, their grandpa dies, and their grandpa was effectively like Walt Disney. And so each one of them gets a letter that says, like, if you want your part of the inheritance or whatever, you have to complete this task. And so in this first book, Rowan gets a letter that says, like, hey, you have 6 months to improve Dreamland somehow. I hope that this, like, reconnects you with your creativity and blah, 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 blah. And so in 6 months, you know, you'll present your proposal for how to improve Dreamland. And if this committee that has been put together agrees to it, you get $25 billion. So he's like, well, shit. So he goes to Florida. He lives in Chicago. He goes to Florida to take over Dreamland and be its new director. And he meets Zara, who's the love interest or the other MC. And she's from the other side of the train tracks or whatever. And yeah, this is basically kind of like a gender-flipped Hallmark movie. There's no Christmas theme, but it's basically like busy businessman goes to, you know, a shitty place and discovers that money isn't what makes him happy. It's the person that he loves that's going to make him happy. Super great message. Really healthy. I totally agree with that. And yeah, so he meets Zara, who is the love interest, the other MC, and, you know, she's spunky and full and really positive, and, you know, she's got dreams, and they end up working together, and then romance happens, and that's probably not a better premise, you know. That's not my job. My job is to read things and then talk to my camera about it and then put that on the internet, and sometimes people think it's funny. I was really trying to work in a way to do like a billionaire joke, where I was like, this book is so freaking bad. And I couldn't figure out a way to do it. So thank goodness I didn't do that joke, right? I think I say this in a lot of videos, but I'm going to try to go through the spoiler-free review pretty quickly because I took a lot of notes while I was reading this. Let's talk about the characters. I think it's really hard for me to tell if these characters were characterized well. I think I would almost describe the characters as almost like kind of cartoonish. Cartoonish isn't even the right word. They're like so exaggerated in their personalities. They're like archetypes that it's like there isn't a lot of nuance to them. And there doesn't really need to be. Like, I don't think this is that kind of a book where you're going to get like really in-depth, nuanced characters, right? So I will say that Rowan is so unnecessarily edgy. Like, oh, he's got a tragic backstory. He has some childhood trauma and all that stuff, but he's like so edgy. It's annoying. Like, I read a lot of manga and I've watched a lot of anime since I was a kid. And a lot of those characters, there's always like an edgy rival character. And I guess because of the context of like it's anime, it's animated, it doesn't really phase me nearly as much. Like, there are some characters that I'm like, ugh, shut up. Rowan's in a different context, but he has that same amount of edginess and angst that doesn't feel justified, that it's annoying. Also, he's like really possessive and creepy and, you know, low-key assaults Zara a couple of times to the point where I'm just like, there's nothing really likable about this character, even when you get this kind of tragic backstory, which is like alluded to throughout the book, but once it's like really spelt out, it doesn't do anything to even remotely justify how annoying this guy is. Like, this isn't the shittiest character I've ever read. Like, I read Yellowface, but he's on the list for sure. Like, he'd be a contender for a high ranking on a list of like shitty characters that I've read. And yeah, there's something about like how seriously he takes himself and how dark and broken he thinks he is, but he doesn't really do anything that shitty. Near the end of the book, he has a change of heart, sort of, and has sort of like a, I don't know, Ebenezer Scrooge type change, sort of. But he's also still kind of the same. Zara's like this really upbeat, dreamer type, you know, like I don't like I almost thought that she was sort of like a manic pixie dream girl, except that she's not super quirky in the same way. Like, she skateboards around and she wears a lot of pins and stuff like that, but she doesn't have a lot of like neurodiverse coding that a lot of manic pixie dream girl type characters do have, you know. And we get into her tragic backstory with like a bad relationship and being, you know, cheated on and stuff like that. And that's kind of like the source of a lot of her pain and insecurity. And she has a hard time trusting people, but we also don't get that deep with her. But again, I don't know if this is that kind of book where you are expecting to go deep with the characters. But even still, I just think that they're so sort of shallow and unlikable, and their relationship and their romance is kind of fucked up and toxic, if you ask me. The only side character that I truly feel impacts the plot is Zara's younger sister. And she it's kind of interesting. She's I think she has Down syndrome, and she's a boyfriend who also has Down syndrome. I thought that was kind of interesting, like, because you don't really get a lot of that in like any media, you know. And you know, talking about disabilities and ableism and stuff like that was a part of the book. It wasn't like a huge part, but it was a part of the book. I thought that was kind of cool. She's a really likable character, you know, really sweet, whatever. Is kind of playing matchmaker between Zara and Rowan because she develops like a mentoring friendship with Rowan, kind of. And so she's cool. We don't get to know much about her other than that she's cool and that she loves her sister and, you know, is part of how Rowan has like this change of heart. But I also wonder if me even saying that is ableist in a way, because this disabled character is just there to further or push the straight white man character to be a better person, and maybe that doesn't fly, you know what I'm saying? Like, she doesn't have a story of her own, she's just kind of part of it. None of the other side characters really matter in the story, you know. It is just these two, and then, you know, they have someone else to dialogue with and whatever, and, you know, dinner with the parents and blah, 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 and conspiring with your billionaire brothers, because we all do that. I didn't love the way I said a couple of things in the original recording of that video, so I'm just going to, like, rephrase it. Also, I missed a couple things. I usually take notes or, like, script out a little bit of what I'm going to say for, like, the spoiler-free section, and I just didn't do that. A lot of the time that I dedicate to, like, preparing for videos throughout the week was eaten up because of some family stuff, just a lot going on. So I didn't have time to write a script. And so I'm just kind of like going off the cuff, and I missed a couple things, and I don't like what I said. I really don't like the romance between these two characters. One of the main reasons being implicit like power dynamics between a straight white male billionaire and then a working class paycheck to paycheck scraping by woman of color. So like the power dynamics of like this guy being her boss and consistently infringing on her boundaries and rejecting her, like making it so that she can't quit her job in a couple of spots. And he makes the statement like, I own you, or you are mine and no one else can have you, and all this shit. That is pretty creepy and heavy-handed, and I don't think that this author realizes that. You know what I'm saying? And the relationship is also toxic. So even without those like power dynamics, I think the fact that the like Rowan's flaws are never really, he never has to change, truly. He never has to do better. Like he eventually becomes a little bit more generous, I suppose, but he is still selfish and greedy and doesn't, put Zara before him really ever. And at one point in the book, he says like, oh, I want to be better for you, but we never see him actually become better. He shows that he cares and blah, 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 but it is like barely the bare minimum. So in my opinion, this book is romanticizing and glorifying pretty toxic relationships and somebody kind of abusing their power to rizz you up. And I don't fuck with that. And the idea of somebody like wanting to own people is fucked up. And the idea of kind of like romanticizing being owned by someone is fucked up, in my opinion. It wasn't until I started talking to a friend of mine, like a fellow writer who just stopped by a second ago, for me to realize, yeah, probably this should get like a 1.5 to 2 stars. I think I say it later in the video, I say like 2 to 2.25 or something like that. But that aspect of the book is pretty fucked. So there's that. And then world building, there's like no world to build. Like the grandpa is clearly supposed to be Walt Disney, and they make reference to random characters that you never see or that don't matter. They're just like princesses and whatever. There's some like corporate jargon and business talk and money going into the theme park, all of which seems like not all that well researched, but I also didn't do the research, so who am I to talk? And then if we're talking about the writing in a line-by-line sort of way, and if we're talking about the writing, like line-by-line or whatever, a lot of dialogue is really cringy because Rowan's so cringy and unnecessarily edgy. Like, he's super villain coded in a context where super villains aren't a thing. And it's really, really weird. I think there's a lot of romance books that are kind of like that. And I've never found it like appealing. I think it's annoying, these characters remind me of kids in middle school who are like always cosplaying and kind of acting out a fantasy that no one else is a part of. You know what I'm saying? I remember there was this kid, shouldn't say his name, who he would kind of talk about like knowing dark magic, not like pagan type beats, but like his hand was cursed or something, and he would, I don't know, it was big like Yu-Gi-Oh anime stuff. I don't know, I wasn't listening, I was busy. But these characters kind of remind me of like an adult version of kids like that, and a lot of the phrases and dialogues where they're trying to talk about how attractive the MCs find each other, it's really over the top, and it's like super corny slam poetry. And so I really don't like the writing. I think plot wise, it's not all over the place. It's pretty easy to follow. There was a turn that I didn't see coming, that I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting, but it is still like well within the realm of rom-com type storylines, because this feels like a rom-com book. It's not funny, but it feels like a rom-com. But yeah, that's kind of it for the spoiler-free section of this book. I'm gonna go back to the original video and do the rant review part now. Okay, so chapter 1, Rowan's POV. The only thing I hate more than funerals is talking to people. So dark and brooding millennial. I'm as tall as an NBA player and have the emotional range of a rock. And then my note was, this is so silly, nobody says this to themselves. Like, nobody describes themselves like this. Their late grandfather has given all three brothers a task to complete to get their inheritance, 18% of the company. Rowan has to take over Dreamland and head up a special project because he lost touch with his creativity. This is like that movie, The 10 Gifts or something. And then I wrote, I bet Grandpa was murdered by the dad that all three brothers hate. Yeah, that didn't happen in this book. I don't know if it happens in another series where that's confirmed or not. I wouldn't be surprised because he seems like, I don't know, billionaires be doing bad stuff, right? So why not? Chapter 2, Rowan moves to Florida and attends a park meeting and sits in the back where the fluorescent lights don't reach, cloaking him in much desired darkness. God, he's so edgy. It is so funny. Like, I'm not amused, I'm not enjoying this, but it is just really funny. This is definitely not a dark romance, but I think even like the fact that he's like this and he's not in a dark romance makes it even sillier. A woman comes into the meeting 20 minutes late with a pink penny board and thick thighs. I hate that my initial thought was, okay, talk to me. She decided to sit next to Rowan and she shuffles around him and he's like, I get a good look at her backside. There's a reason uniforms are mandatory on company property, and this is it. And that's just creepy and cringe. She fumbles around my long legs with the grace of a baby giraffe. Again, nobody talks like this. Like, I understand that we're trying to like make sure that the reader knows that this guy's very tall. And I get it. Short kings don't deserve to be in romance novels. Fine, whatever. Actually, you know what's so funny? I refer to myself as a short king. And one of my patrons told me that I'm not a short king because I'm 5'10". And I'm like, okay, well, if I'm not a short king, then why the fuck did I develop a personality? Huh, Kyle? But yeah, I was always told, like in high school, that since I'm less than 6 feet, I'm short. But I'm 5'10". I lie a lot and say that I'm 5'7" or 5'8" just to fuck with people. I still think that I'm a short king. And it sucks being short and stocky as a dude. So she's like still fumbling around, and a guy who's sitting in front of Rowan, he's an older guy, he gets mad at her, and she's like, oh, sorry, like, can I make it up for you? And she offers like fresh baked bread and cookies, and then he's like, yeah, fine, whatever. So Rowan thinks to himself that because she's so carefree and friendly, she must be dangerous. Zara makes some offhanded remarks about corporate, and then he says, we don't seek to make the world a better place. We seek to make it ours. And again, I'm just like, ugh, shut up. Chapter 3, we get Zara's POV. She says, Rowan might have the look of an angel, but he's pure sin. And my note is, oh, good, both MCs are cringe. Her job is to give like little kids makeovers so they look like the characters that Rowan's father created, I guess. Because he's like Walt Disney, right? So it would be like, if your job was to make little kids look like Cinderella and the princess from Princess and a Frog or Jasmine or whomever. Chapter 5, Zara learns a little bit. We learn a little bit about her ex and her traumatic breakup. She's an inventor and her best friend, a roommate who's gay, by the way. That never comes up again. Oh, wait, no, it does. It does. She hooks up with somebody. Spoiler alert. But that stuck out to me because I was like, if this doesn't matter for the plot, like if she doesn't get her own plot line, it felt like representation, like just like shoving that in there real quick. But yeah, we learn that Zara's ex-boyfriend stole her idea for a ride, which I think was covered in the premise. And he submitted it and claimed it as his own idea, and he got a promotion out of it and all this shit. And then that really broke Zara. And also this dude was cheating on her with her manager's daughter. So really shitty situation, really complicated, and it messed her up. Her best friend kind of dares her, challenges her to submit a new idea or something like that. And she gets drunk and she trashes the ride that her boyfriend stole from her and accidentally submits it, I guess. Chapter 6, Rowan summons Zara, and at the meeting she says that he is her kind of kryptonite, corporate kryptonite. The ocean blue material, he's wearing a blue suit, and she says the ocean blue material highlights the dips and curves of every single muscle like waves of water I want to drown in. And Rowan gives her a promotion, and she tries to say no, and he's like, "Oh, I didn't ask." And I don't know. That waves of water line is either really corny or kind of pretty good. I can't tell. I think I've heard people say stuff like that in poetry slams, and then in those slams they've scored pretty highly, so that makes me think, oh yeah, that's a pretty good line. I don't love it though. I also just like, I don't know. There's just something about the way characters think about each other in romance books that like I think is really silly. I've seen good looking people before, but I don't think I've ever thought to myself, whoa, she's like water and I want to drown in that. Obviously, this is written, this is meant to be like an art form. There's something about the way that characters in romance novels think about each other that always makes me feel like a little silly. I don't know, it's just so poetic in a context where like the poetry isn't really there. You know what I'm saying? Like, unless the prose and the narration is really poetic, then I probably don't think much of it. But in a lot of these like contemporary romance or lit fic books, random like real poetic lines come through, and I'm like, what are you talking about, bro? Because like I'm a spoken word artist and I hang out with other poets and stuff, but when we're not performing, we don't talk like that. You know what I mean? Chapter 7, Rowan checks out Zara while she reads the contract for her new job. He hates that he's attracted to her. She thanks him for the opportunity, and he imagines for the 5th time what her lips would look like wrapped around something inappropriate. We're on chapter 7, and he's already been like, oh, I wonder what those lips would look like wrapped around my little, you know what I'm saying? And I'm just like, come on, dog. Like, we know it's going to happen eventually. I guess this is foreshadowing. I don't like it. So then Zara leaves. Rowan looks up her employee history. He notices that her ex, though he doesn't know that that's her ex, submitted the same idea as hers, and he wonders who the hell is Lance Baker. Chapter 8, Zara gets a new office. She feels Rowan staring at her and her neck tingles, which I think is better than a scalp tingle, okay? And he tries to help her set up her computer, and, there's a line, I get a good look at him on all fours. And I was like, good, at least we're spreading around the creepiness, you know? Chapter 9, Zara and the other creators for Dreamland meet, like, I think they're meeting once every Friday or something like that to present all these different ideas to improve the park. And so this is the first meeting that she's attending. And let's see here. There's a quote. Today he wears a gray suit that has my mouth watering and my thighs pressing together. Okay. Got it. She thirsty. Everyone else's presentation is so boring. And she's really worried and anxious because she sucks at drawing. And Rowan says that everyone else should use Zara's presentation as reference, and then hold Zara back to tell her not to mouth off at him again in front of people. And she's like, let me guess, you'll fire me? And he's like, there are worse things I could do. And I'm like, dude, you can't threaten your employees. What are you doing? They argue, and I think she calls him a jackass or something, and then he kisses her out of nowhere, and then she's super into it, and she's trapped in his thick forearms. A lot of forearm talk in these romance books. I didn't know forearms were like a thing, you know? Like, I mean, probably not mine because I'm not good looking, but I didn't know that was a thing. Is Popeye like super sexy then? And that's not a joke. That's an actual question. So they stop making out. Rowan is like intoxicated and has a boner from it. And she's like, I can't believe I did that to my boss. And I'm sitting there like, you didn't do anything. He did. What? It's giving like, what was she wearing? Like she's blaming herself for just existing, and then this dude low-key assaults her, and she's kind of blaming herself for it. Chapter 10, nothing happens. Chapter 11, Rowan sees another drawing of Zara's and says that he knows someone who can fix it. Chapter 12, that someone is Rowan. Zara wants to thank the artist, and Rowan won't say that it's him, so she gives him a note saying to please pass this on to the person who fixed the drawing. And so he like thinks about throwing it out in the trash, doesn't, and then he ends up texting her. He uses the name Scott, and he decides that he's going to investigate Like, find out what Zara's deal is, because nobody's this nice and nobody's this positive and nobody likes this theme park as much as Zara claims to, right? So she's definitely up to something. And I just thought that was so stupid. And he thinks that she's going to like extort him for money, or she's going to sue or whatever and ruin his plans and all this stuff. So he needs to like catch her or whatever. And in my notes, I did say like, oh, I didn't see that plot development coming. You know what I mean? Like I didn't see this like part of the book coming. And then for the next couple of chapters, nothing really happens. Zara asks for Scott's help again, and she strikes up like a deal where it was like, oh, I'll buy you pizza and I'll give you access to all of my streaming accounts or whatever, so you can watch TV or whatever. So then chapter 19, Zara sets up a mentoring program for staff members who have Down syndrome or disabilities. I think it's meant for just like neurodivergent or disabled workers, but the two people who are part of the program have Down syndrome. It's her younger sister and her boyfriend. Her younger sister's boyfriend kind of sabotages it because she'd made this flyer with her number on it. You've seen those, right? Like you see a poster and it's like missing cat. No, that's probably not a good example. My old job, or one of my old jobs, was teaching guitar lessons, and I put up posters where you had like little slips of paper with my phone number on it so people could rip it off and then call me. And that was a bad idea. Don't do that. Weirdos call you. So Rowan takes all the slips of paper and keeps one, and he shows up, and so it's just Zara and him, her sister, and her sister's boyfriend, and they buddy up, and Rowan ends up being the sister's buddy, mentor, or whatever. And the chemistry is really strong. Honestly, like that's maybe like the one part of this book that I don't dislike, is that this chemistry is kind of sweet. Again, I'm a little on the fence about it though, because like I already explained why. Chapter 21, they're both working late. I think Rowan's using his like texting as Scott to find out that Zara had like worked through dinner and hadn't eaten all day or something. So he shows up at her office or cubicle or whatever and orders like an entire menu of Chinese food, and they like sit on the floor and eat it together. And honestly, pretty big flex. Like it's, get my Chinese food order. It's like $100 now because of inflation. And it's not even that much stuff. I just like Singapore noodles and pot stickers, man. It's not $100 Singapore noodles and pot stickers. I get other things too. It's just those are the two things I want. In chapter 23, Rowan has like a sort of Ebenezer Scrooge moment where he's talking to his assistant, Martha, who's an older gal. I think she works as a bartender or as a waitress at a local pub or something. And she does that because like her husband had a heart attack and they're trying to like cover medical costs, and she doesn't get paid enough at Dreamland to cover those. And so he's like, fuck, I'm an asshole because it's my fault that all these employees get paid so little. So he gives her like a massive bonus to try to help with the cost of the medical bills. Chapter 24, Zara is like taking a work day to attend the park, and to just like as a regular person, just trying to find ideas, trying to think of ways to improve the park or whatever. Rowan went looking for her, didn't find her. He goes and finds her at the park and just like insists on going along for the ride, zing, for the rest of the day because he just wants to be around her and he doesn't know why. Dude's losing his mind, and I'm just like, this is so weird. I don't know, it's like stalker harassment behavior, and it's weird. I don't really see it as romantic. Chapter 26, she's the Bermuda Triangle, and I'm just a lost plane trying to land. She feels perfect in my arms, and I'm tempted to keep her tucked beside me, where I can protect her from all the darkness in the world, including myself. Shut up. Anyways, they kiss, and then he asks her out, and she says no. Chapter 27, Rowan tells Zara that he's been Scott the whole time, and obviously she's pissed, and then he demands to be able to explain himself, and she's like, well, no, that's fucking insane, and, dips. And I was like, super reasonable reaction. Honestly, kind of held back. In chapters like 28, 29, Rowan like tries to force Zara to talk to him because he feels so entitled to like the opportunity to explain himself, and then I assume Zara's forgiveness. And so he insists that she meet him at his house so they can talk. And so she goes to his house for some reason, and they talk, and he kind of gushes about like how growing up he couldn't trust people. I think especially as an adult he couldn't trust people. Women would like poke holes in his condoms so that you get pregnant, now he's stuck with them or something like that, get that child support, whatever. But he has major trust issues, and that's why he did what he did. And then all's forgiven, and they have sex. In chapter 32 they go out for dinner, so I guess they're kind of dating now, not really, but they are. And they go to this restaurant, and they see Lance, the cheating ex-boyfriend, celebrating his anniversary. And then Lance walks up to the table, and then Lance walks up to their table and I guess tries to kiss up to Rowan, even though Rowan knows who this guy is and what he's done or whatever. And so Rowan's like, hey, yo, waitress, let me buy this dude a bottle of champagne. And she's like, oh, well, sure, what's the occasion? And he's like, oh, this dude just got a promotion. And and then Lance is like, oh, I'm getting a promotion. That's amazing. Thank you so much. She's like, yeah, I'm transferring you to Shanghai, which, to be honest, kind of funny. Bit of a power move. Would do the same thing if I could. There's some people I would transfer to Shanghai right now. Chapter 33, 34 is a sex scene where they have sex in the limo or the town car or whatever. These quotes stuck out to me. Your pretty little... I can't even say these words. Your pretty little hasn't even earned my cock yet, and if I had a heart, I would give it to you. And I'm just like, ugh. This is the thing. Okay, so here's... when I think of like bad writing, I generally think like, if I understand what you meant, it can't be that bad. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just like my kind of stance on it. But then the things that are said are bad, and the choices that are made are bad. You know what I'm saying? Like, I hate the dialogue so much because it's so corny and over the top. Chapters 35 to 37, Rowan goes to Zara's parents' house for dinner, and like the best friend, I think her name is Claire, is there as well. And so they're kind of getting to know him and acting kind of like, oh, he's a boyfriend or whatever. And then, you know, like they all work for him though. And it's brought up that none of them make enough to like go on vacation or something. And Rowan's kind of like, oh, wow, that's tough. And then he surprises Zara with a date like the next day where he's like, we're going on a little trip. And they're going to New York City because he's got 2 tickets to a book event by Zara's favorite author, because Zara loves these romance novels and this show based off of them. And so he's got 2 tickets for this event, and they go, and I was like, oh, that's sick. Like, take notes, fellas, you know, take your girl to her favorite author event if she's super into books. Take your girl to New York City if she has always wanted to go. You know, honestly, like when my wife and I went to London, I think one of my favorite parts was just seeing her see London for the first time. And there is something really sweet about watching your partner or someone that you're into experience that kind of joy, even if it's not also your thing. Like recently, my wife was kind of teasing me, but also she was saying that she found it endearing that I was like really enjoying this show that came out recently. So yeah, take your partner to New York City and to book events. Do that. And so Zara's meeting this author, and the author gets like kind of weird and touchy with her. And then she's like, Rowan, you didn't tell me that your girlfriend was such a cutie. And it turns out that Rowan scheduled the event and made this author leave Hawaii to come do this thing in New York because Zara is such a big fan. And it turns out that he knows the author because he owns a streaming company that produced the show based off of the novels. So take notes, fellas. Make streaming companies and just adapt all the romance novel series that you can find. And then one day you will score pretty big. And not even a year into my YouTube career, I am pivoting. I am no longer a book reviewer. I am a dating coach. I'm changing the channel name to Don't Fret, Get Babes. Chapter 38 to 39, Zara shares why she wears all these like colorful pins, and talks about like the depression that she went through after this breakup with Lance. and she struggled with like suicidal ideation and stuff. I really didn't like that part of the book because I think that it was sort of glossed over, and also I hate the rhetoric. Like Zara says, like, I was ashamed of myself that I got to that point, and I understand that some people do feel that way sometimes, like, but I think the rhetoric is really harmful to people who do struggle with that still. Maybe you're over it, maybe you're past it, that's great. But I just think that if you're brought to that low point, that's nothing to be ashamed of. And I think that there are a lot of people who are secretly at that point, and sometimes they don't open up because of that shame and that stigma that we put on being in that low point. I really hated that. That is one of my biggest issues with the book, is that brief line there, it has a lot of weight, and people don't necessarily have to agree with me and think that I'm blowing that out of proportion. I don't really care. I've lost enough people in my life that way that I'm not really open to having a discussion about that. And then Rowan kind of opens up more about his traumatic childhood, how his mom passed away, his father was an abusive alcoholic, and he's being vulnerable. And then Zara's like, I want to fuck this dude. And I thought that was really strange. Maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I'm just like not a masculine man or something like that. But if I was really vulnerable with someone and they were like, I'm gonna fuck you now, I would just be like, no. Like, I'd be like, whoa, hey, take it easy. Like, I'm in a rough spot right now. Like, I understand that emotional vulnerability can create intimacy, but I just feel like is weird. I don't know. I've never experienced anything like that. Chapters 40 to 41, Rowan and his older brother are talking on the phone, and he tells him that he needs to quit being the director, and once the brother takes over, he wants Rowan to be the CFO. Rowan doesn't want to leave anymore. He's like, oh, I can't believe you're doing this for some woman. And he's like, how do you know it's a woman? He's like, I got eyes and ears everywhere. And it's like, ugh, what is this? Like, I don't know. You're not fantasy novel villains. Stop talking like them. Zara gets pneumonia from when she was playing in the snow in New York City. And so she's like at Rowan's house, like trying to sleep it off or whatever. They're about to go to the hospital or something. And then she like gets up to go to the bathroom, and she falls and she gets a concussion. And Rowan freaks out about the fact that she's like, there's nothing he can do to help her. And he feels so powerless, and it reminds him of how his mom passed and all this stuff. And then he's like, this is why I should never have gotten close to her, blah, 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 blah. Chapters 42 to 48, Rowan breaks it off with Zara because he's scared of his own feelings. He's scared of losing her. He clearly needed to hear that speech from the dad from How to Train Your Dragon 2. You know that scene where he's like, with love comes lost, son, and it's always worth it. And he has sort of like a breakthrough, and he realizes that he's not the kind of man that his mom would have wanted him to be. So he tries to get back with Zara, and she's like, nah. And then simultaneously, she gets a letter from Rowan's late grandfather. And the letter says, like, hey, I'm sending my grandson, like, over to, improve the park, and I want you to meet him, and, like, I want you on this committee that is going to decide whether or not his project, like, is okayed and stuff. So then Zara thinks that Rowan knows and got close to her to try to sway the vote and all that stuff. So then she's like, thinks he's this super selfish manipulator. He is so selfish. He's very proud of the fact that he's selfish. So then Zara decides to quit, flip back to Rowan, and he goes to confront his dad and ask him, like, do you regret loving mom and all this stuff? And it was super... It happened so fast. It was so short. It like there was no time for there to be tension, and I didn't feel it. And then 49 until the end, Rowan gives his presentation where he's like, we need to pay our staff more. Here's all the stats and information that say that like better paying jobs are actually more productive, and our staff are what makes us better than the competition. Also, we need to hire more disabled people, visible, invisible, doesn't matter, because I've been mentoring or being mentored by this woman with Down syndrome, and she's the dopest of the dope. And then he's like, also, we need to make the park more accessible. We need to have like costumes that, like wheelchairs that work with the costumes, and be able to like help the kids who are disabled that come to our parks like enjoy it better. The committee's like, awesome. So then he gets to stay the director of the park, and then he gets his $25 billion, and he and Zara get married and have kids. She's like, this line really stuck out to me at the end, but it was a thing that it came through every like spicy scene, where she's like looking at her wedding ring with this huge diamond, and she's like, I like the feeling of being owned by him. And it was something like whenever they were getting down, he would be like, I own you, or you are mine, or whatever, and he like would make her say it and shit. And all of that, so creepy to me. Like, owning people, wanting to own people is weird. Wanting to own people is messed up. Like, there's something wrong with you if you're like, yeah, I want to own a person. Like, what the fuck? And then I think being like romanticizing the idea of being owned by another person, super weird. You know, I don't like it. Made me really uncomfortable, and I think that's part of what makes this relationship so fucked up, and all the like lying and the selfishness that Rowan does, and the fact that he doesn't really, like, at one point he says he wants to be a better person, but he doesn't ever become a better person, you know, even like when he's a father. Yeah, that's the end of the book. I didn't like it. It was tough. All the kind of quotes that I wrote down, those are just some of them. I was like, I can't just read the book to y'all. That would take forever. And it's probably copyright infringement to just sit and read a book at y'all. I think if you're a fan of the genre, then this is probably super fine, or probably pretty good. I don't know. But for me, a lot of the dialogue is really cringy because Rowan is so edgy for like no fucking reason. Like, I've had a sadder childhood than this dude, and I'm not like that. And I know a lot of other people who've had it way worse, and they don't talk like this, and they don't want to own people, and they don't act like they own their spouses and shit. Thank you so much for watching this video, especially if you made it to the end. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. If you want to support the channel in a really big way, as well as gain access to exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, make sure you consider subscribing to my Patreon. There you'll get an extra rant review video from me once per month, as well as access to my private Discord server, the Don't Fret Club Discord server, where you can chat with me. Bunch of really lovely people talking about books, writing, movies, music. We just had like a big semi-argument about Taylor Swift, so that was fun. We also are doing a book club, and we live stream once a month where we meet up and talk about the book that we read together as a Discord server, as a Patreon community, and it's really fun. So if any of that sounds interesting or exciting to you, make sure you consider subscribing to my Patreon. Special shout out to my patrons Keisha, Cassie, Knight Smith, and Oliver. Thank you so much for your support. You're helping me make this content and ensure that I'm able to put it out as frequently as I do. Everybody else, again, thank you so much for watching this video. My name is D. Don't fret. I'll see you next time. Peace out.